Following a campaign rife with controversy, Uhuru Kenyatta is sworn in for his second presidential term in Kenya. How new technology could help solve the public health problem of fatigue. And Prince Harry's engagement and the connection to the continent. Africa 54 starts right now.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Vincent McCory. This is Africa 54. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta was sworn in for a new term on Tuesday.
Without fear.
Without fear.
Favor.
Favor.
Affection.
Affection.
Or ill will.
Or ill will.
So help me God.
So help me God.
While thousands erupted in applause at Nairobi's Kasarani Stadium for Kenyatta, his re-election follows a divisive election campaign that included the country's top court throwing out the results of one vote and an opposition boycotting the deciding contest. Now, Kenyatta is tasked with trying to unite the East African nation still reeling from political strife. Police also used tear gas before the ceremony to try to control the large crowd attempting to force their way into the venue. Police used the tear gas in parts of the capital where supporters of opposition candidate Raila Odinga plan to hold a memorial rally to honor those killed in confrontation with security forces during the election period. Kenyatta won about 98% of the second and final vote. And last week, the Supreme Court validated those results over the objections of the opposition, which alleged irregularities.
I have taken on board the aspirations of the people of Kenya to move forward. I dedicate all my energies and that of my administration towards achieving two principal objectives over the course of the next 5 years. The first is to strengthen the ties that bind us as Kenyans at every level of our society. It is time for us as a people to learn that it is fine for us to agree to disagree while still strengthening our bonds of unity and nationhood.
Well, for more on Mr. Kenyatta's inauguration, Jill Craig, VOA East Africa correspondent, joins me live via Skype from Nairobi. We just listened to President Kenyatta there, Jill, kind of promising to strengthen the ties that bind Kenyans. Is that something that is resonating with the people in Kenya on this particular day when he was sworn in?
Yes, well, as you know and as you've mentioned, this election season has been particularly contentious for Kenyans, and I don't think that at this point his message of reconciliation is being heard by probably at least half of the electorate, or roughly half of the electorate. I will say, though, that Kenyatta has, for his part, made that same, given that same message both today at the inauguration. He said it at the acceptance speech for the second time that he was given the nomination, and also for the first time that the Electoral Commission announced him as the candidate back in August. So that is a message that's been that he has been using, and I think that most Kenyans are just hoping that he does follow through on it. People are curious about who is invited or has accepted an invitation to the inauguration. It looked like some key presidents across the country and other people perhaps from the rest of the world were missing. Was that something that was of interest to the media locally? I think that was of interest probably last week. Well, I'm sorry, when Mr. Kenyatta's team, I believe, was accused of asking some foreign leaders for a congratulatory message. That definitely did make the media sensation, the media rounds. But I will say that today, I think people were quite happy for the presidents that did come. I think Kenyans were quite pleased that other presidents just, made time in their schedule to come to this event. And you had presidents from, obviously in the region, you had the leaders from Uganda, Somalia, Djibouti, South Sudan, which some may question a bit as to why the South Sudanese leader had time in his schedule right now with so much going on in his country to come to the inauguration. But I do think the Kenyans for today were just quite pleased to have such a glitterati grouping at their president's inauguration.
But also there was some excitement outside of the stadium. The police engaged other Kenyans. What was it like? Was it significant, that particular event and the disruption by the police?
Yes, I will say that outside the stadium, it was quite chaotic. You had many people, and I wouldn't hesitate, I wouldn't want to venture a guess as to how many, at least hundreds of people pushing their way to get in because they desperately wanted to see the inaugural ceremony. When they did this, the police forced them back with tear gas. Then they pushed ahead again. And I saw on a few occasions people literally just running into the gate once it's open, and there were about, I'd say, 6 or 7 police on horseback and then a few other policemen on foot trying to control that crowd, and they were unable to do so, so they started firing tear gas. Later on, yes, there was a stampede. We know of at least one, well, there were several people actually that were hurt in this, and you saw them sort of being tended to by medical personnel once they did sort of get into the stadium. So it was a bit chaotic, I will say, outside of the stadium for people hoping to get into the inauguration today. Interesting.
I'm happy that you got out safely yourself. Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Me too. Thanks, Vincent.
That's VOA's East Africa correspondent Jill Craig speaking to us live from Nairobi. Now, the main opposition leader, Raila Odinga, now says he will also be sworn in as the people's president on December the 12th. Now, for some perspectives on the way forward for the opposition, Jared Okello of the opposition party ODM joins me on the phone from Dallas, Texas. Jared, welcome to Africa 54.
Thank you very much, my brother Vincent. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Tell me first, what do you make of today? There's an inauguration that's taken place. Should the country move forward?
Well, my sister has raised critical issues pertaining to the questions you did direct to her. Firstly, is about the presence of dignitaries, presidents from across Africa and across the world. And you look at only 8 presidents representing Africa out of 51 nations is a vote of no confidence in the Jubilee administration and that of President Kenyatta. If you have to move the nation forward, particularly looking at the economic turmoil and economic uncertainty that we have had as a country, you definitely need your neighbors, and the immediate neighbors are those from the African continent. And giving it a wide berth is a testament that we are headed to a very wrong direction as a country.
Now,
you do know.
Now,
you do.
Go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah, you do know that we have had even thawing relations with Tanzania. We were meant to have oil refinery, doing oil refinery for Ugandan oil, but they diverted it to Tanzania.
Yeah. Now, before we run out of time, the opposition leader Raila Odinga is now saying he will also take an oath of office on the 12th of December. Tell me, how does this help now the country then moving forward?
Well, we did say as the opposition, firstly, that we were not recognizing the election that was carried out on the 26th of October. You remember that we had a quest to have electoral justice that was going to come up with the reforms within the electoral administration. All our agitation to have a clean electoral merchandise were thwarted by Jubilee administration, and that therefore informed Raila Odinga's abandonment of the 26th election. So when he did that, obviously we had expected the law to follow, which therefore necessitated all political parties to carry out a new round of nominations. But that wasn't so. Now, having failed to recognize the election of the 26th and the subsequent swearing-in ceremony today, the former Prime Minister has come out to say that on the 12th of December, which is our Jamhuri Day holiday, that he will be sworn into office. What he has categorically mentioned is that our Constitution, particularly Article 1, Sub-Article 2, that gives absolute powers and sovereignty to the people of Kenya, and that sovereignty can only be exercised through duly elected representatives. And Kenyans are saying Uhuru Kenyatta has not been duly elected, and then so the people are taking back that power, taking back that sovereignty, and deciding for themselves who will then lead them as a nation.
Quickly, what's the end game? What's the end game here? Very quickly, in about 25 seconds.
Well, the end game here is on the 12th, we will converge under the auspices of People's Assembly in Nairobi and see into it that Raila Odinga is sworn in. And that is not unconstitutional. As I have said, our Constitution gives the people the mandate to decide their own destiny, after and including who then becomes their president. Now, the question that will therefore come is, how will we then reconcile with the police brutality and all the force that have been meted on very innocent demonstrators, peaceful demonstrators and protesters? But we are saying we will take care of that when the time comes.
And we'll talk a bit more about that. Actually, when you come here to Washington, hopefully you'll be in our studio here, and then you explain to us how we'll have those two parallel systems operating in Kenya after December the 12th. Mr. Okello, thank you very much. Jared Okello is a member of the opposition party, ODM. Going further south, Zimbabwe's new president, Emmerson Mnangagwa, has acknowledged that the Southern African nation has a troubled past, rife with human rights abuses at the hands of the party that ruled the nation for nearly 4 decades under Robert Mugabe. However, Mnangagwa's swearing in last week has been since been followed by several high-profile corruption cases against his political enemies, which critics say are just short trials to avoid addressing more serious crimes. VOA's Anita Powell reports from Harare.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa sees only one way forward for his wounded nation, battered by human rights abuses and endemic corruption: forgiveness. But just a day later, the state jailed former Mugabe-era minister Ignatius Chombo on massive corruption charges.
I think that they're just using him to try and portray an image of dealing with corruption and so forth. But the cases that my client is facing, these are very old cases. I think the most recent is 2005, which shows that there is nothing really serious on his part. It's just to harass him and then to try and create the impression that we are dealing with corruption.
Human rights lawyers say there are worse crimes and more serious culprits who are being protected.
If there are crimes that have been committed, everybody should, in fact, be put on trial. It shouldn't be selective at all. It shouldn't depend on which faction you belong to. Are you on our side or the other side? If the law is being used to right wrongs of the past, this should be done with everybody.
Many Zimbabweans do not want former leaders to rest in glory. Patson Zamara's older brother Itai was abducted in 2015 for opposing Mugabe. He's still missing.
Current President Emmerson Mnangagwa played a very major role, and so he's complicit. He was a part of that arrangement and government. And for us to sweep that under the carpet and say that was that, and life just has to go on as though nothing happened. I don't think it's proper.
Churches, which occupy a powerful role in Zimbabwe, are also struggling with the notion of letting bygones be. Pastor Chris Oporocha says he looks to other African nations for guidance.
In Zambia, we saw when President Levi Mwanawasa came into office, Chiluba, who was the outgoing president, was not given any immunity. He had to pay for the crimes that he did. He might not be sentenced to prison, but whatever evil has been done should be brought to light so that those people are dealt with.
Zimbabwe, its people agree, has to move forward, but no one thinks it will be easy. Anita Powell, VOA News, Harare.
Well, France's President Emmanuel Macron is on a 3-day visit to Burkina Faso, Ghana, and Ivory Coast. The aim is at boosting cooperation in education, the digital economy, and migration. Now, Macron met with regional leaders, but also was confronted with protests against him, ashore of the hostility that still lingers after decades of an often tense France-Africa relationship. For more on Macron's visit to Africa, I'm joined by Bagassi Koura of VOA's French service. Bagassi, welcome to Africa 54.
Hi.
Now, first we know it always looks like it's a ritual. Every French president, yearly or as soon after being elected, has to go to Africa. But it looks like increasingly there's a lot of hostility. What's going on? What's going on with the former French colonies?
Yeah, it looked like, yeah, you're right. The newest generation feel like most of the problem today, whether it's the economy with France CFA, whether it's the political situation, where they think France has stood by many of the strong men for years, and they think much of the problem come from France, and that at some point Africa needs to cut its tie with colonialism and imperialism.
And we see this as a strong push from mostly the young people. Is there any effort by these former French colonies to kind of disconnect themselves with France, or at least reduce the influence of France in the country?
What was interesting today, Macron stopped by the largest university in Burkina, where he had basically, after his speech, a town hall meeting with students. And it was very challenging for him because people, push French, push him to say, look, we don't want your France CFA. And increasingly he said, no, it's not me, it's your president who is sitting here. After this speech, after this town hall, he can just declare, I'm done with France CFA. And I will be supporting him for that. Really? Yeah. French military, you ask me, what are they doing in the Sahel? Well, we are trying to help you guys because we remember in 1914, African soldiers were in France helping also. So this is a history. We cannot just sit here and just decide to be disconnected. But whatever you guys decide, we're going to help you. I'm not here to give you lessons. I'm here to see how we can partner. We're going to push Europe to give more, to allow more students who studied in France.
So we see a disconnect between the older generation and the new generation. Yes. So does it look like the current political leaders have the willingness to kind of reduce that French influence?
It's really tough because they still don't have economic leverage, to turn their back to French overnight. Everything like tomorrow. No, this afternoon, Macron is going to a ceremony opening the largest solar panel station in West Africa. It's been financed and built by French engineers and French money. So it's really hard for government in West Africa to say, no, we are done with France because they don't have, they are not strong economically.
Muscle, yeah. So, maybe the future, perhaps they will develop other linkages with other countries.
It's a good start.
It's a good start. Bagassi, thank you very much for sharing with us those insights. Well, that's Bagassi Koura, VOA's French service. We want now to know what you think about Africa 54 and the stories we cover. Join the conversation on Facebook. The address is Africa 54. We're also streaming our show live on Facebook. So check us out and share our show with your friends. Find me on Twitter at VOA Vince McCory. Coming up, the new technology that could reduce fatigue-related deaths. Stay with us.
I'm Jeff Selden, and I work the National Security Beat. National Security Beat is anything that affects the national security of the United States, from counterterrorism to surveillance to even relations with Russia. It's one of the most fascinating beats you can have. It's probably one of the more important beats that you can cover because it touches on so many areas of the world, so many areas of people's day-to-day lives. I'm Jeff Selden, and my beat is national security.
Well, joining us now is Africa 54 health correspondent Lenore Mudu. What do you have for us today, Lenore?
Hello, Vincent. Well, Kenya has embarked on its first phase of a national telemedicine initiative that aims to improve medical education, training and research, as well as access to better health care for marginalized communities in rural and poor areas. The initiative is a partnership of Kenya's Ministry of Health and Germany-headquartered Merck Group. They say the telemedicine program will provide a platform that will enable patients and healthcare providers in rural areas to interact with health experts at Kenya's main referral hospital, Kenyatta National Hospital, using video conferencing. The initiative will link Kenyatta National Hospital to the Machakos Level 5 hospital located in the eastern region of Kenya. Now, a recent U.S. National Sleep Foundation study found more than half of all drivers report driving while drowsy. And U.S. government statistics show nearly 72,000 accidents and 800 deaths in the United States were caused by drowsy driving. But some new technology could help solve this public health problem. VOA's Kevin Enochs reports.
The north wind and the sun were disputing which was the stronger. The notion behind some new health technology is that fatigue shows up in your voice. A group of British scientists decided that if people actually sound tired, then a computer can be trained to hear that fatigue. What we're trying to do is build a model of a person's voice by making multiple recordings over a period of time. And what we can find from that is we can see these very subtle changes that occur even within a day, even within one shift of work. You can see changes to the characteristics of the voice.
Over time, and with a lot of repeated readings, the computer algorithm was able to detect when a person's voice is off, with 90% accuracy in the lab.
I think the innovation, in a way, is to build an algorithm with the sensitivity to sort of detect these small changes in the voice that occur, and then convert that back into a time of day, effectively, which records really how your voice typically sounds at different times of the day. And if it doesn't match the time of the day, then you're either more alert than usual or less alert than usual.
The algorithm worked in the real world as well. It was tested on mining equipment operators in Peru. The technology could help stop fatigue-related accidents, which some studies say are responsible for about 65% of all mine accidents.
The goal is not to stop the driver doing their work or to prosecute them or to stop the truck driving. It's simply to protect both the health of the driver and, of course, the safety of the vehicle.
The company hopes to have a commercial product ready for release in the next few years. Kevin Enochs, VOA News.
Health experts, advocates, and government representatives agreed recently to take urgent action to end tuberculosis by 2030. The announcement came at the first World Health Organization Global Ministerial Conference on ending tuberculosis in the Sustainable Development Era. Global efforts to combat tuberculosis, TB, have saved an estimated 53 million lives since 2000 and reduced the TB mortality rate by 37%. However, health experts say TB still kills more people than any other infectious disease. The Moscow Declaration to End TB is a promise to increase multi-sectoral action as well as track progress and build accountability. Dr. Mario Raviglione is director of the Global TB Program with the World Health Organization.
Tuberculosis is the top infectious killer worldwide with 5,000 deaths every day. It is also the main cause of death in diseases caused by antimicrobial resistance and is the #1 killer also among people living with HIV. So it's an epidemic that is not being controlled in many settings, despite the progress that we have seen in the past few years. That's why we need, at the highest possible level of political commitment, to fight this epidemic.
The Moscow Declaration will also inform the first UN General Assembly high-level meeting on TB in 2018, which will seek further commitments from heads of states. And that's our health report for today, so stay in touch for more. Find me on Twitter at Linor Moudou. Back to you, Vincent.
Well, and thank you very much for joining us today, Linor. Be sure to watch for Linor Moudou every Tuesday and Thursday for the latest health news in Africa right here on Africa 54. It's time now for a short break. Still to come on Africa 54. What's the connection between Prince Harry's engagement and the continent? We'll be right back. Welcome back to Africa 54, and here's what's trending. Britain's Prince Harry and US actress Meghan Markle appeared for a photo shoot at London's Kensington Palace following the announcement of the engagement. Markle showed off a dazzling three-stone ring designed by Harry himself, with at its center a diamond from Botswana, which his office said was a place special to the couple, surrounded by 2 diamonds taken from the personal collection of his late mother, Princess Diana. Next up, moviegoers made their way to a cinema in Cameroon's second-largest city, Douala, over the weekend for the premiere of the country's first ever animated feature film, Minga and the Broken Spoon. The animation, made with an all-Cameroonian crew, is based on a popular children's book and tells the story of Minga, a young orphan who was chased from her family home by her stepmother after breaking a spoon. Written by 2 professors back in the 1970s, the book has been read by many generations over the years and was even included in the school curriculum. The filmmaker is working on releasing the animation in other parts of the world, with the movie's DVD due for release in 2019. Well, and finally, fitness trackers and heart rate monitors have become must-have devices for people who want to keep fit. But wearable technology has been slower taking off. Now, a startup in Ukraine has come up with a smart fitness T-shirt fitted with data analysis electrodes, fabric-integrated wires and sensors. The T-shirt transfers the signals to a tracking unit from where data is sent to the app, which analyzes it and provides training insights, live cardio zone statistics, and ongoing fatigue assessment, training intensity, and stress levels. The app sends alarm signals in this ECG or pulse, shows dangerous levels. ECG data can also be sent to a doctor for remote monitoring. And that is what is trending today. And that's it. Have a good night.
Welcome to English in a Minute. We all need air to breathe.
Hey, Jonathan, guess who's coming to dinner tonight?
Who?
Franco.
Not him.
What? He's fun, and he really knows how to keep the conversation going.
He's loud and talks only about himself.